Cool, cool. All right, so just a little bit of a look around the charts for the morning. What are we at? 10:30. Just underway with the sort of Asia session. So nothing too super substantial so far. So yesterday, firstly looking at the Aussie and that, we saw this little spike up here. This was a second push off the back of sort of China data and pretty much sort of straight sort of sold into. It was an interesting sort of spike because after it sort of sold off, I think where did we get here? Around the 65.10. So this is pretty much where we're expecting it to sort of come to, this sort of mid-range here. But we saw it was just a gradual, slow drift off. You can obviously see it better on the lower time frames here. This low sort of where are we at? This was this low sort of drift off all the way through the rest of Asia, Europe, and that, and then yeah, sort of coming into sort of end of Europe, we got these sort of nice big spikes up. There was a bit of US data out here, but of course, you know, didn't manage to hold this and bang back down. But what it did give us was this third, and this is on, you know, 1 hour, 4 hour. You can kind of see these things pretty well. But it gave us a sort of third touch for, so if we put this, so we got 1, 2, 3. So this is sort of starting to sort of firm up a nice sort of breakout line. So obviously we can sort of use this to our advantage and say, okay, this is where the sellers are actually sort of moving. They're coming down each time. They're respecting this line. So obviously once we can sort of break through this line, well, we're starting to see a little bit of reversal. You don't want to go for it straight away because obviously if you look at this candle here, this is a first attempt out where it's sort of come up here. So this is on the 1 hour. This is just prior to Asia Open. There's a bit of sort of Aussie data out of PMI. Not really big impactful sort of bit of data for us. I mean, the PMIs do tend to move things, but Aussie just doesn't seem to really sort of impact it a great deal. And even sort of if you have a quick look on whatever it is, that FX calendar, it's marked down as a sort of low impact, but it did beat expectations, and possibly this is why we got this little push up prior to sort of Asia opening. But of course, here's the break, and then boom, and now you can see it's just being sort of sold into here. So it did also have this nice little resistance we were forming. So to sort of trade these ones, you get the breakout, you get the pullback. But once it breaks this high here, where we go, boom. Once we break that high here, that's the confirmation. So this at the moment, I mean, it looked like it was breaking out. We've got this big falling resistance, and it's just been popped back into it. So that's not to worry. Look, I'm not expecting much today because we've got NFP tonight, and realistically, you're not going to get any major breakouts sort of prior to a bit of news like this. So I expect the market to be mainly fairly subdued today, pretty tight ranges. So you can buy these dips, and I would expect them to sort of be sort of just floating around, you know, 20-point range at least for the Aussie today. So yeah, that's something to sort of just keep in mind. But I'd expect sort of once we do get the NFP print sort of come out, expectations are a drop. So well, we had 187 last month. 170 is the expectation today, so a drop. So a drop on the NFP is going to see US dollar continue to sell off, which I'll have a look at the US dollar, like DXY, in a moment. But we'll see a continued sell off of the US dollar, which will give Aussie and also gold, of course, and copper and China the breakouts that they need, because everything's sort of sitting at these little resistance zones. If we look at the higher time frames, but it just needs that oomph, that confirmation, that bit of news on a fundamental level to break the technical levels. So if we look at the daily on the Aussie, obviously we've got some resistance around the zone here. We did get a slight sort of close a little bit higher than these previous ones here, but I mean, if you have a look at this, it's a pretty weak sort of thing. I mean, what are we? Yeah, 5 points on a daily. Like, you know, it's not really anything substantial. Realistically, you're looking at two dojis here. I guess this is a slightly bullish inside day, which is inside days tend to sort of lead for a bit of a continuation, but the double doji is obviously the market just sort of contemplating whether we're done with the selling and you know, we want to push higher or if we're going to come back down. So the key sort of breakout levels for the Aussie are going to be these highs over here, the 65.20s. If we can break that, then realistically, I think there's a good chance if you know, if we get that low print and we get the US dollar continue to sell off, we can start to look for these higher ones there. So there's a price target from a bit way back, but yeah, I would tend to sort of almost sort of probably get rid of this unless we sort of get a touch down the bottom here. I wouldn't expect this rising resistance to sort of hold. I would be looking for these horizontals. And as you look back, we can sort of see, you know, definitely sellers were happy to come around here. This is obviously a time when we had buyers around here. So this is a big point for us, the high 65s to sort of 6,600. So I would say that's the price target there. So 65.70. You may get a little bit of an overshoot, as you saw with these ones here. These were sort of big wicks at big solid candles at one stage, but obviously sellers are happy to jump in here. So 65.70 to 65.90 is pretty much, I think, an acceptable sort of price target if we get that low print on the NFP. So if we flip across to gold, similar sort of story in terms of it sort of hitting resistance. So you can see it on this one here a little bit better. Where do I have that chart? Anyway, yeah, so we can see here, you got a couple of things coming into play. So we've got this big falling resistance coming down through here. That sort of gives us a little bit of a sort of tweezer top with a bearish close here. So I'd expect a little bit of downside at least before sort of this print comes out today. As we can see, it's sort of flowing through a little bit here. So again, I don't expect, there's nothing to give it a catalyst to have a major sell-off prior to the NFP, particularly with the expectations being to the downside. The market's going to be pricing for a US dollar sell-off. Surprise to the upside is always a risk, of course, but certainly, again, I think these are the levels, the 47 to 49, that we should be sort of looking at for the major breakouts, and the NFP is going to be the catalyst for that if we get that lower print. So I still think this potential move is in play. As to where it sort of actually starts from, well, you know, we'll sort of see how it goes there. But yeah, I think sort of certainly if we get that lower print, I think 65 to 70, 65 to 70, 72, they're my sort of price targets for an upside move on gold. So where we around here? Yeah, 65, 72. Oop. Beautiful. In terms of sort of short term with gold, as I mentioned, I think we could potentially see we've got these sort of three drives at the top here, which obviously all sort of failed to sort of hold anything substantial, and thus we've got this little bit of a sell-off. But as I said, it's mainly very choppy, up and down, up and down, up and down. Possibly be able to get some 35 buys if you wanted to try and get long early, which could always be a thing. Give yourself a little bit of room prior to this NFP print, but I don't expect to see a great deal again prior to all. We do have China data coming out, the Caxton PMI manufacturing or something like this. I think it is at 11:45. Don't know. I don't think this will impact gold too much, but Aussie certainly one to watch out for as well. The DXY. So as I mentioned the other day, we got this is the major break here. So where we sort of came through this is where we've seen the sell down, sell down. Yesterday's video was done around this point here. You can see the gap down on Asia Open, and this is pretty much as we expected. I expected it to sort of come down, test this zone. I didn't think it was quite ready to sort of completely melt down. And as you see sort of subsequently, once it broke this sort of channel, a failure to sort of continue this, I would have liked to see this sell down, come down a little bit deeper before a retest of this other side here. So a failure to sort of continue on this channel is the first sign that we may be starting to see a bit of buying action and reversal coming in. Once it broke this level here, took out the swing highs, it just took off. Last night you sort of had a little bit of sort of weak US data in. You know, it seemed to have sort of overcome it a little bit. One interesting thing to look at the Aussie with the DXY, and I understand that Aussie isn't part of the DXY, but just using DXY as a sort of risk barometer. Um, Previously, for the whole last month, any sort of push up, even just marginally on DXY, really had a big impact on the Aussie dollar. So that was one to watch. But even sort of despite this push up here, sort of like overnight, if you flip onto the Aussie, it hasn't seen a relative sort of sell off to the downside here. As you can see, sort of a month ago, I mean, you need to sort of see it side by side, of course, but Aussie dollar was just selling off on any sort of little push up with these risk off moves. So yeah, it's actually holding up quite well. So I don't, as I said, I don't think we're going to see anything major right now. So yeah, you can sort of start to look, okay, where's the sort of kind of higher sort of ranges and that, and possibly push down to 60. We'll have to see. I think this China news will sort of impact this a little bit as well. Speaking of China, we see it's still super choppy. If you've watched any of my last videos, you know that my sort of consensus is to the downside. I still think we've got this large trend to give a touch up, which we haven't sort of seen for a long time. So this is still my price target down here, 715. Of course, it's sort of taking its sweet time to get down under here because it's got these previous highs over here, which it set up, and it has just been relentless in holding it. It's actually sort of pushed down a number of times, but if you look at these, the reactions that you've had previously, speaking of sort of, I mean, this one sort of more or less, a couple of cents or something missed this, but this exploded back up. This exploded back up. This exploded back up. Let's look at a couple of candles with the similar thing, and then we saw another one here. So the buyers have really sort of valued it at this level and that enough to actually sort of start to move up and then sort of start to try and make a new little recovery channel. But as I mentioned yesterday or the day before, I can't remember where, must have been 2 days actually looking at these candles here, we saw this sort of divergence of this like recovery push. So although you had the sellers coming in a little bit higher, so relinquishing, you had the buyers kind of pushing up, we're trying to make another sort of channel. We were seeing these coming up, and this is where it's good to look at the stoch, the RSI, where it was the buying efforts here were just coming in lower each time. And even then, obviously, the flow on was that so hit this first high here, got here, next high here, here, and these are moving down while the price is moving up, means that the buying pressure isn't there. Even these highs followed through, and obviously, bang. I think this candle here was probably that news last night from the US. So yeah, so we've got this lower support range here. So the purple I've marked out as a high time frame, but obviously this has been the real area where the buyers are sort of sitting, as we've seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tests of this now. And I would say if you're long on this, as I said, I've got my alert set up here for when this is taken out, and certainly a close to confirm down here because obviously these are big sort of bearish candles at one stage and then they sort of fire back up. Same with this one over here, same with this over here. You want to see the close down under this zone under here to sort of confirm that the buyers are depleted, and then we're going to see that sort of continuation. First target at the 61%. As I said, I expect a bit of a bounce and then back down to the main target over there. China's in a bit of a precarious sort of position, but they're still PBOC still they're still the second largest economy, so they're not going to sort of fail overnight. So that's where we're sort of looking at with that. Copper, we're still seeing this this original line here holding for the sellers. So as I said, that was the price target met. We've retested it. It was looking quite good here for a second, and then of course, bang, back down. So as I said yesterday in the video, we know that this is where the sellers are sitting. And if we look at these little sort of pullbacks here, quite deep sort of pullbacks. I was saying over this last push here, we give a 78% pullback, but so choppy you can't really sort of put too much stock in that at the moment. But what we do know is that these are where the sellers are. So if we can sort of get through that zone, so where we are, oof. sellers, 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 sellers. So if we can get through this zone, then we're going to sort of see something similar for the break here, the retest, and then the push up. And as I said, still my price target, depending on when we get here, is still contact with this big falling resistance. I think that's still some upside. And as I said, sort of NFP again will be the driver. If we can get these lower prints than that, a high print, well, all these things, obviously, they sort of change a little bit. We look for the lower levels, a little bit more of a US dollar strengthening, and possibly a sort of retest of that underside of that main resistance. Main sort of rising support that we had previously. As you can see now, actually, we're seeing DXY sort of getting a little bit of buying action early. As I said, it's in a bit of a tight range here. If we break through this part here, then we can start to look for the lower levels on the sort of corresponding instruments. But for now, as I said, I still think, particularly with the China news coming through soon, that we're just going to see a lot of ranging through Asia and probably sort of most of Euro session as well. Cool. All right, that's pretty much it for me.